Tonight we will examine concepts that may challenge your perception of the world around you. Strange creatures, chilling tales, and the occasional conspiracy. Here on our show, we will attempt to provide you with paranormal insight. Hello, everyone, and welcome to Paranormal Insight. With me today is the man himself from the uNcomfirtable podcast. Eric, why don't you go ahead and introduce yourself and tell us a little bit about yourself.
From the uNcomfirtable podcast. It doesn't sound right, does it? Hey, I'm glad to be here with you, and I know you've just started out, and I appreciate you reaching out to me to be on this. It's really, it's one of the things I had no idea was going to happen at some point, and that was to be invited onto other podcast shows,
right,
to talk about, whether it be your life experiences or just the vast number of people that you've talked to and their experiences. So it's a really wonderful aspect to doing this, and quite honestly, it's one of my favorite things.
Oh, fantastic!
It's hard to shut me up. So,
well, let's jump into the first question. First off, I want to do a little housekeeping with you. When you had me on your show a while back,
Yep.
I was a bit of a mouth breather. The mic I was using back then was extra sensitive, and it picked up all my lip popping and my mouth breathing because I had allergies back then and still do a little bit. But my apologies for that. And I also wanted to say thank you. You gave me a compliment. I never really acknowledged it. I didn't realize you had said it until I listened to the episode again, where you commented on Scary, and you thought the name was cool.
Absolutely. Yeah. What a perfect paranormal name.
It's great for a paranormal group. Yeah, no, I appreciate that though. And I never said thank you properly, so thank you. I appreciate that.
You're welcome.
Okay, let's jump into you.
Okay.
So you have been doing, congratulations, by the way, on passing your 100 episode mark.
I appreciate that. Thank you.
No problem.
Honestly, if somebody back when I was in those beginning days, honestly, and this isn't just, trying to sound humble, in the beginning days, I was enjoying what I was doing, and I was happy with the interviews I was getting, and I had a couple of banger shows, just starting off.
Yeah.
But man, to be honest with you, if I got past 10 or maybe 20 episodes at the most, I would never have believed that I would be sitting here into my 100, and I think this coming Tuesday will be my 103rd episode. It'll also coincide with the 2-year anniversary of the show starting.
Fantastic.
So
fantastic.
Yeah, it's crazy.
So, and thank you also for your advice. You gave me a lot of advice in getting started on my own podcast. So I want to thank you for that.
Well, you're welcome. And I think, that's the thing. I think it's important. I had an opportunity to go on the Confessionals podcast, and, Tony said it was a banger of an episode, and, from what I know, it performed really well for him. And I remember saying to him, there's nothing I can do with being a small podcast. There's nothing I can do to thank you, with the size that he's at. And I said, all I can really do is tell you that I'm going to pay this forward in whatever I can. So when I come across good people that are doing things for the right reasons, I want to help them, because if I didn't get help, I would be struggling. So yeah, it's a thing. And, you know, like most of the guys that I talk to, most of them, not all of them, most of them, they're all in agreement that there is plenty of weirdness to talk about.
Oh yes.
There's no real competition.
Yeah.
You know, it's a matter of, you know, and our friend JJ, she kind of brought this to my attention. I don't think she meant to in this way, but, you know, I started thinking, she had made the comment at one point that I was chosen by the universe. Let's just say that, because I had a voice, and she meant it two ways. One being that apparently, and I hear this from a lot of people, that I have a very, very calming, very, it kind of draws you in kind of FM voice.
Yeah.
And the other part of it was, not so much the literal voice, but the figurative voice, that you have a platform to say the things that should be said.
Right.
And that was kind of a hurdle that I had to get over, because I don't have any ego when it comes to this show. You know, I'm not looking to become a personality. I'm not looking to, oh, hey, look, there's Erick Szilagyi. You know, I want people to go, oh, hey, Uncomfortable Podcast, because, you know, great guests and great conversations and stuff. But I'm not looking to be a recognizable face or name in this genre.
Right.
But, you know, like what we're doing here, you having me on to get out in front of your listeners, and then, you know, me bringing you on to my show earlier on, you know, so you could get in front of my listeners. It just helps.
It does.
It helps everybody, and it's a good thing. And like I said, everybody that I've found that has been in agreement to this, there's no lack of weirdness to talk about, you know?
To say the least. Yeah.
Yeah. So,
and in,
you know,
in various forms too.
Sure. But to be fair, we had a pretty good conversation as far as, you know, the potential equipment that you should be looking at to start a podcast.
Yeah.
And stuff like that.
I followed your advice, as you can see.
Yes, you definitely did. And it's a considerably better sound than what we had before.
Yeah.
But that's the thing. Let's get everybody on an even playing field, right?
Right.
You know, so the stories, the experiences, the guests, that is what drives these shows. So let's get everybody on the same page. You can have the best guest, you can have the most banger conversation, but if you sound like a staticky AM radio station,
right,
that's a lot of work to get through.
Yes.
And people are going to tune out, you know, and that's what we don't want. We want people, you know,
right. We're trying to bring information to this.
Exactly. So
to our listeners, let's talk about your first experiences with the paranormal. And I'll limit this to on-air experiences versus off-air experiences. If you want to include any off-air experiences, that's entirely up to you. The first one I'm aware of is episode 5, where you hear, I think that's the Dinner with a Witch episode.
Yep.
And you hear in the background, quite clearly, although diminished, the whoop, the Bigfoot whoop. Here's that sound played back and amplified from episode 5 of Uncomfortable.
Yeah, you live your life. And
what was that? Yeah.
Okay, why don't you talk to us a little bit about that?
Okay, so to be fair, before I get into that, that was not the beginning of my experiences in real life.
Okay,
in true life.
Okay. Do you want to go into that then?
Yeah, I can. You know, there's a lot, so I'll kind of run through it quickly.
Sure.
And if there's stuff you want to hear more about, then stop me.
I will.
So at 5 years old, I was obsessed with UFOs.
Oh yes. We shared that. Yeah.
Yep. At 5 years old, and again, I've said this a million times, we didn't have streaming services. We didn't have computers. We didn't have tablets, so for me to be that obsessed over UFOs at 5, that was an odd thing. Looking back on it now, I don't understand why I was so compelled to be interested in that topic.
Right.
But then move forward, a few years, 7, 8, 9, 10. I'm getting into Bigfoot. I'm getting into Loch Ness Monster. The Bermuda Triangle at that time was a pretty big thing.
Yeah.
All of them just, anything that was like out of the norm really just appealed to me. Ghosts. I loved watching scary movies, whether it was the old Hammer films or the old Universal Studios. I can remember sitting behind a chair in my mom and dad's living room watching Christopher Lee as Dracula as the sun came out and he started turning to ash, and I was so scared.
Oh yeah. That
I was behind the chair, but yet I had to peek out and watch, like the chair was going to save me. It's like, it makes no sense.
Yeah, childhood logic is fun.
But then around somewhere in the neighborhood of 7, 8, 9, in that area, I remember looking, and I filled my days with this stuff. I'd check out books from the library, whatever I could, as far as, digging into this weird stuff at whatever level a 7, 8, or 9-year-old can.
Right.
But I can remember my parents would get annoyed at me when I would have trouble going to sleep.
You watched a scary movie again, didn't you?
Yeah. And Planet of the Apes was another thing. I loved the Planet of the Apes movies. And then in the mid 70s, I think it was, they had a television series that was based on the Planet of the Apes.
That's
so I used to watch that. And all these things kind of played on a young man's mind. And when I would go to bed, every creature that I had ever read about or saw an article about or saw a picture of was right outside my bedroom window. Of course. waiting till I fell asleep so they could reach their arm in and grab me and take me away.
Or reach out from under the bed or the closet or whatever it happened to be, right?
Yeah, that's funny though, because I was never really, I don't remember ever really being concerned with anything coming out from under the bed or out of the closet. It was always like outside my bedroom window.
Interesting.
So at about that 8 or 9-year-old age, I can remember laying in bed, and I had been facing the wall. I rolled over and was facing my doorway. And, I used to have to sleep with the hallway light on just because I needed a crack of light, and my door could not be shut. It had to be, 6, 7, 8 inches open.
Yeah.
So I could see the light coming through.
I can relate.
And I remember turning over, and I opened my eyes and I looked at the doorway, and I saw a shadow standing there, a silhouette.
Wow.
And so I was an only child. And at this time, there were only 3 people living in the house. It was my mom, my dad, and myself. And my mom was short, kind of pudgy, curly hair. And my dad was short, very stout, and he had a flat top every day of his life.
Gotcha.
So very recognizable silhouettes.
Gotcha.
And this silhouette that I was looking at was neither of them.
Can you describe it?
Yeah, it was on the taller side. I don't remember any hat. It had the outline of here's the other thing, as I'm going into the description of it, with a hallway light on, with one of your parents standing at your doorway, that hallway light would have cast a brightness to the back of them. You would have seen some clothing. You would have seen, some coloration of, the shirt or, the side of their head or anything.
Right. Yeah. In film and photography, it's called the halo light.
Yeah. And there was none of this. This was just a black, darkish. It wasn't blacker than black, like you hear some people say.
Sure.
This was like a dark charcoal, smoky, I'm not saying that I could see through it. It seemed solid.
Yeah.
But it was taller. It was very trim. It was lanky. Not like unusual though. Not like distorted. Just looked like a tall, lanky person.
What did the head look like? Did it have hair?
It had hair.
Okay.
It had hair. I don't remember seeing a hat or anything like that. I don't remember a trench coat or anything like that. I can't even, honestly, I can't even tell you that I remember seeing like maybe the outline of a collar or anything.
Okay.
Clothes wise. It scared the hell out of me.
Yes.
And, so I closed my eyes and scrunched them tight. And at some point I opened my eyes again and it was gone.
Okay.
And, I never said anything about it. I never told my parents about it because I had so many conversations with them that if I don't stop, you're going to have to stop watching this. You're going to have to stop looking at these magazines, and all that. And I didn't want to do that. So I kind of manned up.
Kept your mouth shut for the sake of the content.
That's something that I never talked about. It was just always something that and I can close my eyes today and I can still give you a pretty, I can tell you I have a pretty good recollection of what it all. Now from the waist down, I can't tell you legs. I don't really remember. I remember from the head to about mid torso,
Gotcha.
maybe to the waist. And I never talked about this. I never posted it in a blog. I never talked about it on my episodes. It was just always something that I kept to myself.
Interesting.
And it wasn't until I did an episode with a psychic medium out of the East Coast, Karen Tatro. We had a great episode. It was two episodes long. And she, out of the goodness of her heart, she's like, thank you so much for having me on. I'd love to give you a reading if you would like it, like as payment for having me on and letting me talk about myself. And I was like, yeah, sure. I'd really like to do that because I had a couple of other experiences where I've gone to get a reading and one, they were open, but they would not open the door. I think
you mentioned this before, but go ahead.
They had a little peephole, like you can see a security hole through the door.
Sure.
And I saw the light get blocked out twice, but they would never answer the door. And then again, I went to one. It was like I was with a group of people that we went to some kind of, I don't know if it was necessarily a paranormal convention, but it was, there was somebody there that was giving readings.
Right.
The woman looked up and she goes, "I'll read you. I'm sorry, I'm not reading you." To me.
Okay.
And I was like, well, why? And
Yeah.
she's like, "I don't want to get into it." At that point, I was kind of starting to get a little bit of a complex of it.
Yeah. Psychics,
honestly, it's like, what are they seeing, or
right,
or either they got a really good sense of, I don't hide anything on my face. So maybe my skepticism was showing through, and, maybe she just didn't want to deal with, maybe she wasn't legitimate.
Oh.
And maybe she was afraid I was going to see through it, or I don't know, or maybe she was legitimate and she saw something that was hanging around me. I don't know.
Could be. Who knows?
So I didn't get that reading either, but when Karen offered it, I said, yeah, absolutely. And that was the first time that I had an experience with with somebody to do a reading. And I was pretty gobsmacked by some of the things that she came up with. And, there's this about psychics, there's bad ones out there.
Mm-hmm.
There's people out there that hoax, and they fish. They have people that look online and go through your Facebook, and they go through all your social medias, and they pick things out of it, and they use those as triggers to make you be like, oh my God, how did they know that?
Right.
Well, it's pretty damn easy.
Especially today.
Yeah. The thing I can say for myself is I have a very small footprint on social media. I am not the guy that has to post when I walk out of the living room and into my kitchen. I don't check in my kitchen. I don't have to, I don't post pictures of my kids every time they have a birthday. I don't,
Right.
Oh my God, my son farted sideways, please send prayers. I'm not that guy, so there's not a lot out there about me. You can Google me and you can find that, you can probably find I was married and that I lived in South Bend, Indiana, and that I lived in Niles, Michigan, and that I'm divorced, and it'd probably even tell you that I got 2 kids, and might even tell you I had 3 dogs at one time. I don't know, but there's not a lot out there about me.
Right.
So what she was able to tell me were some things that really kind of dropped my jaw a little bit.
Way outside the parameters of any real research, right?
Yes. And the one thing that she brought up was that you've had a shadow person.
Wow. Talk about nail on the head, you know?
And I said, okay. I said, well, yeah, I did. And she goes, you were very young, weren't you? And I was like, again, yes. And she said, the weird thing about it was that she could not nail down what it was. She couldn't nail down that it was a human spirit, that it was she said there was nothing about it that made it seem malevolent, but she could not isolate where it was from.
Interesting.
And she said, it's been there. It will continue to be there when you are in times of, not really like duress, but when they're in times of change, where there's question. She's like, I can't tell you much about it because I'm really not getting any kind of indication of where this thing is from. So, that was confirmation for me. And then again, some of the things that some of the spirits that she indicated that were around me was pretty spot on. And the thing that kind of threw me was the one female spirit that was around me was a short, kind of roly-poly, curly hair, very animated, seemed to have a really good sense of humor, kept kind of nudging the male spirit beside her. And what she was describing was my mom.
I was just going to ask it. That sounds like your mom, the way you described her.
Absolutely. But the thing of it was, my mom was not dead yet.
Oh, that's strange.
But my mom had been struggling for years up until that point with increasing dementia.
I see.
And, it took me a while. It took me probably pretty close to a year before I reached out to Karen again and asked her. And then subsequently I asked Karen Tatro, Christina Rake, the Archbishop who I had on, who wrote the book, God and the Paranormal.
Right.
I asked them both the same question. And that question was, since my mom's brain was diminished and it was not her anymore, is there a possibility that her spirit had begun the transition prior to her body giving up the ghost?
And their answer was yes.
Both of them.
Oh,
yes.
wow.
Yes, absolutely.
That's amazing.
So,
that makes sense on a parapsychological level too.
It does. I mean, when they said yes, I didn't have a hard time wrapping my head around it. It does sound, it goes against what, most of us have become accustomed to understanding as far as somebody passing over.
Right.
But if the spirit and the consciousness are connected, then it makes sense that if that piece of machinery is no longer working properly, it started to make the transition. And unfortunately, the last year of her life, I had to put her into a nursing home because I couldn't provide care for her anymore on a 24-hour basis. I still had to work. And it was one of those things. It was very tough to to see her in that environment. And, the grieving process pretty much started there.
It's a prolonged, I was just going to say.
So, she lasted almost a year to the day in the nursing home before she passed away this past November.
Oh man.
And, it was a much easier transition for me. And I felt really bad about it. I felt guilty because, I didn't have the huge breakdown of crying and, oh my God, what am I going to do? And I had lost my dad back in 1987, so he'd been gone for years and years.
Uh-huh.
But I think that, whether it was a little bit of a removal of myself from her every day that helped, or just kind of knowing that she wasn't fully here anymore.
Right.
And, thankfully she passed in the middle of the night while she was asleep. It was a peaceful passing.
That's always,
but I really think that a part of her spirit and her consciousness had already crossed over.
So my question to you was, I am aware of this, and I think we talked about it when I was on your show, at least briefly, or maybe even off the air, but there's something known as the higher self in spirituality. And perhaps, I don't know if you have any insight on that, but do you think perhaps that was your mom's higher self speaking to you or interacting with you before her passing?
The description was spot on.
Yeah.
The personality traits that she hit on were spot on. The other interesting thing here, and I guess maybe this either makes me sound really, really crazy rather than just crazy, or
no judgment here, man.
Yeah, the other spirit that she said was with this woman that I assume was my mom was very tall, wore big heavy work boots, very tall, and just a big lumbering man. And he was sitting in a chair. And her description of him was my son.
Wow.
And my son is alive and well.
Yeah.
He is just a red hair under 6'5".
Okay.
And he's a big lumbering dude.
Okay.
And he wears steel-toed work boots every day of his life.
Gotcha.
The interesting thing is, I think, unfortunately, my divorce probably caused some aspect of this to come to the forefront. He had, when he went off to college, he started struggling with some anxiety.
Oh,
really bad. Nothing like life-threatening or suicidal or anything like that.
Right.
Just he was struggling with just a lot of anxiety, and we had tried to treat it with some CBD and to see if that would help, and it did a little bit, but eventually he ended up having to go on a medication, which I was really trying to keep him from having to do.
Right.
When he did get that medication, though, that was a huge change for him. It was much better for him. So at the time when she was giving me that reading, he was not on that medication. He had just started it, I should say. So I wonder if that segment of his consciousness, that segment of his spirit that was being affected by the anxiety, now that he didn't have it anymore, had that passed on?
Perhaps.
Or, I mean, was it more something that, like my mom, if that was my mom, was she kind of pulling that part of his spirit to her in a effort to, maybe console them or make them feel better. Right. I don't know. It was a strange entanglement there that, I had two, because my mom loved my kids.
Yeah.
Right. Ridiculous amount.
Typical grandma, right?
So if she felt that he was struggling,
yeah,
and she couldn't give him the love like she used to while her brain was correct.
Yeah.
Was she pulling some segment of his consciousness to the other side where her brain was good so that she could, I don't know. I mean, it's a crazy.
From a paranormal investigator standpoint, I've done my share of studying on this type of thing. Yeah. And the higher self, it sounds like that's what you were dealing with. You're dealing with those higher, right. There's 2 levels to the human spirit, apparently. I haven't confirmed this, but everything I read and everything I've either also witnessed would suggest that may be the case. So maybe these 2 higher selves were there for you, backing you up, because they had their own thing to do. Okay, let's take a quick pause for a break, and we'll be back right after this. The Seekers of California for Ethereal Research and Investigation. We investigate hauntings, cryptids, UFOs, and offer cleansing and clearing. Don't get scared, call Scary. Serving the greater San Jose area and beyond. Call us at 408-320-8467. That's 408-320-8467. Scary Paranormal Investigations. Welcome back. So, you had, potentially, your mom and your son's higher spirits visiting you during a pretty tough time in your life.
But they were still both alive.
So that's why I suggested it was their higher selves versus their more common human spirits, so to speak.
I'm very open to the possibility of that. I mean, could it have been someone else? Could it have been someone that was, similar? My mom's great grandma, she was, kind of portly and kind of the same shape and everything.
Could be.
It could have been her. I'm sure at some point, both my grandfathers were dead when I was, I don't think either one of them saw me up until like maybe the age of 3. They were 6'1" or so, 6 foot and 6'1". Not huge guys, not to get the description that I was getting from Karen on the male figure.
Right.
Could it have been somebody else, beyond earlier than that was, absolutely it could have been. But it just struck me the descriptions were very, very similar to, very reminiscent of my mom and my son. So that was a bizarre thing.
Yeah. What happened? What else happened to you beyond that you had your experiences with, I guess, off the air or leading up to perhaps episode 5?
Well, probably in the age of around 18. I graduated high school as a junior.
Oh, good for you.
Wow. We had, I was going to take that, my senior year off, work, put a bunch of money away to get a leg up going to college. And I was dating a girl who, she had gone down to Southern Indiana to IU University. And in between, breaks when she would come home, back in those days in the 80s, it was a big thing to do mixtapes, right?
Oh, sure. Yeah.
So I would do a mixtape, I'd talk for a few minutes before and, say whatever, I love you, or, I miss you or whatever. And
sure.
Then I'd play some of the songs that we would listen to when we were together and go cruising or whatever it was we were doing. And, so I had made a tape and I'd sent it down to her. I sent her some of her favorite candy bars and a couple other things, and just kind of like a care package. And I had been down in our basement, and I had a boom box that had a dubbing thing on it. So that's where I was making the music tape.
Gotcha.
So I sent it to her, and my dad, he was a good guy, but he was very cheap. And and he would not allow me to make long distance phone calls from the house. So if I wanted to call her, I would have to take a bunch of change, and I would have to go down to a payphone. I don't even know if people know what the hell a payphone is anymore.
Believe it or not, they still exist in some places.
Do they really?
Yeah, believe it or not, yeah.
So I would go down, a few blocks into town, and I would use a payphone and call her. And, I'd get to talk to her 15, 20 minutes until the next girl who was just screaming and yelling, get off the phone.
Oh, gotcha.
In the dorm.
Right.
And so I go down and I call her, and, she had gotten her package, and she hadn't listened to the tape yet or anything. And I think I called her like once a week, and I got the package back. Oh. And there was a note in there that was like, this was horrible. Why would you do this to me? What do you think? This is funny? And like, I had no idea what the hell was going on, and the candy bars were still there, and everything was still in the package. And I was like, what's going on?
Oh.
So I got in my car, I drove down a couple of blocks, and I called her, and she wouldn't take my phone call. And I called her back like 3 times. And finally, one of her friends from the dorm, she gets on the phone, and she goes, I don't know what your problem is, but that wasn't funny. And
wow.
I'm like, what are you talking about? And she said, listen to the tape like you don't know. And she hung up.
Wow.
So I went back to the house, and I listened to the tape. And on the front side of the tape, I had Frankie Goes to Hollywood, and some of the music that was really popular back then.
Sure.
And in fact, the Frankie Goes to Hollywood song that was on there was something. One of the lines in the song was, "I will keep the vampires from your door."
Oh, sure. I know which one you're talking about.
I can't remember the name of it.
Yeah, me either.
And I listened to the tape, and then I flipped it over, and where there should have been, and at this point I'm just listening to it because my heart's broken, and what better way than to listen to the music that you sent your girlfriend who just broke up with you, right?
Really, just put salt in the wound. Yeah, why not?
Yeah. And I'm listening to it, and all of a sudden, as the tape starts to play, I start hearing this just this really low, guttural, horrible sounding growl that, it just went on and on. There wasn't like any breath being taken. It was just like a continuous loud growl. And it took up like 10 minutes of the tape.
Get out.
And then it left, and it went right into whatever the rest of the songs were that I put on there. And I was freaked out.
Yeah.
And I took the tape upstairs, and I was going to tell my parents about it. And I'm like, what am I going to say?
There's
so I called my buddy.
In your basement? Yeah.
What's that?
There's a hellhound in your basement?
So I called my buddy, and I said, man, I need you to come over. And he's like, oh, okay. So he comes over, and Kevin, he was this really big, heavy set dude. And he was like, not from this time. He was a gearhead. He should have been born in the 50s. All he liked to do is work on cars. And, he had a white t-shirt, blue jeans, big belly, laughed like a crazy man. That was the best part of being around him, man. You could not help but smile when he started laughing.
Right on.
And I rewound the tape, and I played it for him. And, a lot of his actions always kind of reminded me of the Three Stooges, because he was like, he'd get these high pitched tones to his voice. And I started playing it for him, and he's like, what is that? And I'm like, I have no idea, dude. And he's like, you got to tell your dad. And I was like, you think so? And he's like, mm-hmm. And he was shaking his head really, and his poor cheeks were just wiggling. So we took it up to my dad, and we played it for him. And here's the really weird thing, is that his reaction was not what you would have expected. You know, it was not, what the hell is that? What am I listening to? What are you guys doing? Wife, you effing around? You know, what is this? He listened to maybe a minute of it, maybe. And he hit the eject and he pulled the tape out and he handed it to me. He goes, take this out to the end of the driveway and burn it.
Wow.
And I said, what? And he said, take it down to the end of the driveway and burn it. And I was like, I looked at Kevin, and Kevin, again, Kevin's looking at me. He goes,
mm-hmm. Big yes.
Shaking his head up and down. So we took it out to the end of the driveway where the curb is. And my dad used to have this little plastic shot glass that he would put gasoline in to get leaf fires started.
I gotcha.
So I poured about half of the shot glass full of gasoline. I poured it on top of the tape and I set it on fire. And as I stepped back from the burning tape, in the flames, I saw a blue upside down cross.
Get out. Oh, dude. I knew you were going to say something like that. Man.
And Kevin, God love him, there was smoke coming off the bottom of his tennis shoes.
Oh.
He was, by the time I turned around to look where he was at, I saw him going back into the house. He had run up the driveway into the garage and was going back into the house.
Crap. Wow.
And it came back inside and Kevin's standing there. He's like, tell him.
Yeah.
So I told my dad what I saw. And he said, and it was like without any, there were no pauses. There was not like, what am I going to do? What should we do here?
Gotcha.
He told me a prayer to say. And he's like, when you say your prayers at night, add this. And it was basically, see if I can get the words right now, because I always say it in my head, because I still say it till this day.
Good for you.
Cover us with your blood, my friends, my family, and myself. Protect us from all that's evil in the world.
Is that the whole prayer?
Yeah.
Oh, wow. That's short. That's short and sweet.
That's it.
Yeah, I've never actually heard that prayer before.
I've never heard it anywhere else before. So either he was really good at thinking on his feet.
Yeah.
Or he heard this someplace else.
That sounds like something that's passed down, because you don't come up with that.
Yeah, it was an immediate thing.
Oh.
I'm no longer Catholic. I'm no longer practicing. I am not a part of any organized religion. My spiritual experience now is something that is much more personal than having somebody stand up in front of me and preach.
Right.
More personal than somebody standing up and asking for money.
Yeah.
It just is. And that's not to fault anybody who, wherever they find their faith and their belief, if that's what works for you, bless you, man.
Yeah.
But that's where I had to go to find my faith and to find my belief. It's a much more personal thing.
I understand completely. You and I are living virtually parallel lives on that aspect. I mean, that was, I didn't have a tape explode with the upside down cross in the flame, but I mean, same thing. Religion was the same with me. It's more of a personal thing for me now. I don't go to a gathering like most folks do, but I understand it completely where you're coming from on that.
It's much more, I feel it's much more gratifying than anything that I have ever experienced prior to that.
I couldn't agree more. Absolutely.
So I had that happen. Then, my dad passed away. He was hit and killed by a car.
Oh man.
Now, in fairness, it sucks.
Yeah.
But he was drunk.
Oh.
And he decided to walk home from the bar.
Okay.
So,
okay.
Public service announcement to all you youngsters out there.
Yeah.
call an Uber, call a friend, call a parent, call your girlfriend. Somebody will come get you. Don't try to walk home, you know?
Right.
And so that sucked. You know, I mean, he's there one day and boom, he's gone.
Yeah.
And it wasn't anything immediate. This probably didn't start happening for maybe 8 to 9 months after he passed. But I started having some weird things happen in the house. And one of them was I'd gone and purchased my first cordless phone. It was a Cobra.
Oh yes.
It had about a 2 foot tall antenna. Right. You had to pull out. And I'm laying in bed. It's, somewhere in the neighborhood of 2:00. And the phone rings. And, whenever the phone rings in the middle of the night, it's never good, right?
Right.
So, I wake up and I answer the phone. I pull the antenna out and I put it up to my head. And I hear this male voice on the other side of the phone say, "Hey, boy." And it was my dad.
Wow.
And then as soon as he said that, it was a landline still. So, sure. And all of a sudden it went, disconnected.
Disconnect. Yeah. Wow.
And, I sat there for a second and I was looking around the room.
Right.
And I was like, I'm awake. I know this just happened. I know this just happened.
Right. And what time was this?
This was in the neighborhood of 2:00 in the morning.
Okay. Gotcha.
So I closed up the antenna. I put it back in its base. And as soon I had not even pulled my hand back from the base of the phone, and the phone rang again. And I let it ring a couple of times. At the time that I had bought the new cordless phone, I also bought an answering machine. And I had it set to kick on after 5 rings.
Gotcha.
So I'm sitting there, I'm debating whether or not I should answer the phone again. And on like the 3rd ring, I grabbed it, I lifted up the phone, and there's a woman's voice on the phone. And the woman says, "Is everything all right?"
Okay.
And I said, "Excuse me?" And she goes, "Is there anybody in the house that shouldn't be in the house?" And I said, "What?" And she goes, "Is there anybody in the house that should not be there?" And I said, "Ma'am, I don't know what the hell this is. What are you talking about?" And she said, then she introduces herself as Sergeant so-and-so from the South Bend or St. Joe County Police Department. And they had just received a 911 call from this location. And she says, could you please get up out of bed and make sure that there's nobody else in the house? And I was like, okay. So, I get up and, I don't sleep with any clothes on. So I'm walking through this house, bare ass naked with my nickel plated 44 Magnum.
There you go.
And the phone in my hand. And I'm basically clearing my house, and I get through the whole house. I come back to the bedroom and I was like, "Ma'am, there's nobody here." And she's like, "Okay." And then she says, "Well, do you by chance have a cordless phone?" And I said, "Yeah, in fact, I just bought one a couple of weeks ago." And she goes, "Oh, well, we've been having reports that cordless phones have a tendency to dial 911 on their own." And I was like,
okay.
Again, it's 2:00 in the morning. I'm still kind of groggy. My brain is still trying to wrap my head around, I just heard from my dad.
Right.
And then, why in the world would my brand new cordless phone dial 911 by itself?
Right. I mean, was that one of those weird features? Because they had them back then where you
to my knowledge, no.
Okay.
To my knowledge, no.
Okay. Because they had some pre-programmed buttons is what I was going to say.
Yeah. It took me some time, but then I started thinking about it, and it's like, was that an artifact of hearing from my dad? Because I mean, the longer story is that I didn't realize that my mom and dad were not in a good position as far as their relationship was before he died. And, after talking to my mom, they were basically together because of me.
Oh, I see.
So, when he did die, she was sad and she grieved, and, I think she grieved more sadness that, the relationship had gotten to the point that it was when they were, so in love to begin with.
Right.
But she had she didn't abandon me. I was still living in her house, but she had kind of started to like sow her oats, much like people do right after a divorce or something like that.
Sure.
So she was hanging out a lot with this one guy, and she was spending some time, on the weekends living at his house, and she would be back here a couple of days a week. But for the most part, she was spending it with him. And, I started thinking, and it's like, did my dad feel like I had been abandoned? Did he call 911 because he thought I was in trouble, that I needed help?
Yeah.
Was he, for whatever reason, did it take that long for him to be able to reach out? Was he confused? Did he call 911 because he was maybe having glimpses of, the accident and him not knowing what was going on? Who knows?
One thing that I find interesting about that is that she wanted to know if anyone was in your house.
Yeah.
So she must have gotten a report that said someone's in this house. That would be the only reason I asked that question.
Well, I think, years later, I had been watching, I think it was a TV show. It may have been a movie. I'm not sure. Where if they do get a 911 call from a residence, and that 911 call is hung up without ever anybody answering it, they do call back.
Yeah.
And they try to give the person who answers the phone the opportunity to indicate that somebody might be in the house that shouldn't be there without actually saying it.
Gotcha.
I've seen some episodes of a show, where they're, like, do you want pepperoni on your pizza? And pepperoni means send the police.
Right.
Yes, I'd like pepperoni, please. How long will it take to get here? Stuff like that. So, right. I've never been a law enforcement officer. I don't know what the protocol is for taking a call like that, but the whole thing was just very strange, and for them to coincide seconds apart, leads me to believe that there was something acting on both ends of that call.
Right.
So, and then from that point on, for a while, there were some things that continued to happen that were really pointed at my dad. One of which was in July, he had turned 50 before his death, and I had purchased I'd gotten a pretty good job, and I bought him a gold Mariner's crucifix, which nice. I don't know if you know what that is, but it's Christ on an anchor, basically.
Yeah.
And he wore it all the time, and when he died, I collected his belongings that were on him. I got his wallet and his buck knife and the gold chain and Mariner's crucifix. And then I started to wear it all the time. And after, I wore it all the time. So from sleeping with it and, like knit blankets getting caught in the rope of the chain, and it kind of started to, it'd seen better days.
Right.
So I decided to go buy a new chain for it. And I decided to start taking it off, when I didn't need to wear it. So I took it off one day when I was getting in the shower, and I set it on the counter of the bathroom counter. And it wasn't a huge counter, but it wasn't like directly by the sink either. And I went in and did my business. I got my shower taken, got out. I was drying off, and I went to grab it to put it back on. And it was gone. And I was like, oh, shit. So I looked down on the floor. I thought maybe I knocked it off. I started looking at the terry cloth towel, thinking that the point of the anchor got hooked on the towel. And I was looking at that, and I went back and I retraced my steps. And, it was really apparent to me that I remember taking it off in the bathroom and setting it on the thing. So I was like, shit. So I went and I got a plumber's wrench, and I took the gooseneck off the sink. And I found the most disgusting hairball but there was no chain. And it was, eventually I just stopped looking for it. It was gone. So flash forward, some time, and I was getting ready to go out on a date. It was summer. I had a nice tan, and I was going to wear my favorite jeans, and I was going to wear my favorite white button-down shirt, because I had a tan. I figured it'd show off my tan.
Yeah.
So I went and put the shirt on. I got to the top button, and the button pops off, and I was like, shit. So I would have been walking around looking like a Guido with my shirt unbuttoned all the way, but I didn't have a gold chain anymore, right? So I wasn't going to be able to pull that off. So, my mom was spending a lot of time with this guy, and I wasn't emotionally, I did not want to deal with seeing pictures of my dad. So I had closed the door to my parents' bedroom, and that was just a place that I didn't go, while I lived in this house, because I didn't want to see the family pictures and stuff.
Gotcha.
But that's where the sewing basket was. It was under the bed in my mom and dad's bedroom.
Gotcha.
So I walked down the hall, kind of took a deep breath, opened up the door to the bedroom, and I walked in, and immediately, I'm sitting there looking at a picture of me and my dad in Traverse City, Michigan, like when I was 14 years old. We were on vacation or whatever. And it was like, okay, I mean, yeah, I was getting the feels, and I don't like that a lot.
Right.
I don't like to be an emotional person. But I sat down on the bed, and I reached under the bed, and I felt the sewing kit. I pulled it out, set it up on the bed, and threaded the needle. And I looked up, and there was the dresser with a mirror on it was in front of me. And over my right shoulder was my dad's military picture.
Oh, what branch?
He was in the Army.
Okay.
And so it was a black and white photo, but they used to send them away to be like kind of colorized.
Yeah,
these pastel colors. It added some color, but it didn't look really natural.
Yeah, I know what you mean.
It was like a military picture of my dad with a bunch of rouge on his face. It didn't look right.
It didn't look right at all. Yeah, I know exactly what you mean.
But the way his head was turned in the picture, it was turned like this, and it was looking like over my right shoulder. Okay. And I don't know, I just kind of got a warm feeling. And, I sewed the button on. I looked around the room again, and, looking at some different pictures, and I was like, all right, I'm okay with it. And I looked over at the side table, beside the bed, and my mom used to always bitch at my dad because he'd never use coasters. He'd always go to bed with either like a glass of ice water or a glass with ice and some Coke in it.
Gotcha.
And he'd leave it sitting on this wood table, and then there'd be that white ring. And I looked over at that side table, and there was a partial white wet ring on that table, and sitting in the middle of that was that freaking chain with the Mariner's crucifix.
Be damned. Wow.
And I saw it sitting there, and I was like, okay, I get it.
Yeah.
I get it. You're still around, and so, that one right there, that was really, really profound for me.
No kidding.
That left no doubt in my mind that he was able to and willfully interacting with me from beyond death.
Right.
So, a few more things. The woman I ended up marrying, she moves in with me at some point. I'm a bouncer in a bar, and I called her one night and I said, "Hey, are you coming down to the bar tonight?" She's staying at my, she says, "No, I think I'm just going to stay here and listen to the symphony." And I was like, "What?" And she said at one point, it sounded like every pot and pan that was in my mom's cupboards had just kind of let loose and just clanging all over the place. And she went in the kitchen to see what was, if a shelf had broke or something like that. And everything was stacked up normal and nothing was out of place. And there was no explanation really for the noises that she was hearing. So she was experiencing some stuff.
Wow.
We had at one point, we used to have this argument because I used to try to pull my load, so sure. On the weekends, we'd clean the house. I'd do laundry. I wasn't above helping out and doing that kind of stuff. Well, she used to get pissed at me because I didn't do the laundry right. And maybe granted, maybe I didn't separate the whites all the time, and maybe her white shirt came out pink a couple of times. I don't know, but I was putting in the effort.
Right.
Well, one day, I think it was like a Saturday or Sunday afternoon. She said she's going to go take a shower, and I took the basket of clothes down to the basement to the washroom. And at that point I set it down and the phone started ringing. So I ran upstairs and it was my mom. So I talked to her for about 20 minutes to a half hour, something like that. And then I went back downstairs to do the laundry, and every bit of the laundry that was in that basket had been pulled out and thrown across both sides of the basement, because we have a ranch house, and it had a wall going down the center of it. On the one side was utility, on the other side was kind of more like finished.
Oh, gotcha.
And part of the clothes were on the finished side, part of the clothes were on the utility side. And I immediately just like turned around, stormed back upstairs, went to the bathroom. I opened up the door and I started yelling at her. It's like, what the hell are you doing? I mean, I'm trying to help out here, and every time I touch the laundry, you're blowing a gasket. And I'm reading her the riot act. And right. She pulls back the curtain to the shower, and she sticks her head out, and she's like, "What are you talking about?" And I said, "The freaking laundry downstairs. You threw it all over the place." And she's like, I've been in the shower for, and she did. She used to take like half-hour long showers.
Gotcha.
So she never went downstairs.
Oh man.
So, that was another thing that happened. And, we decided, at one point we wanted to move out and have our own place. So, I kind of convinced my mom to stop seeing this guy that she was seeing, because he was pretty much a dipshit. And, we decided to go get ourselves an apartment. And when we were moving out, I was, like I said, I was a bouncer, but I also was on a semi-pro paintball team.
Oh, right.
One of my guys, several of my guys from the paintball team were helping us move, but one in particular, he was I had this huge pedestal waterbed that was, a King Plus, California King Plus.
Ooh,
and
a waterbed to boot.
Yeah. Wow. And I had drained the insert, and we were taking apart the pedestal, and I had a drill, and he was holding stuff while I was unscrewing everything. And he looks over at me and he goes, "Hey bud, like, I'm going to help you get this out of here." And then he's like, "I'm going to go over to the apartment, and I'm going to wait till you get there with the truck, and I'm going to help you get everything out of the truck and get into the apartment." And I was like, "Dude, that wasn't part of the deal. I need your help here." And he's like, "Yeah, you got stuff going on." And, he's like, "It's cool, but I don't really want to." He's like, "I'll help you get this in the truck, and then I'll go over to the apartment, and I'll be there when you get there." And I was like, "What are you talking about?" And he's like, and he just, we're both kind of laying on our sides on the floor, working on the underneath of this pedestal waterbed. Yeah. And he kind of looks up, kind of indistinctly at the ceiling or whatever. Right. And he's like, and I'm like, you can tell. And he's like, "Oh yeah. Yeah." So, and So he took off after that. And sure enough, he was at the apartment and he stayed till like 3 o'clock in the morning helping us haul shit out. But he didn't want any part of being in here.
Wow.
So those are things that really solidified for me that there's something that is acting and interacting with us from beyond wherever that veil falls. There is definitely some circumstances that allows them to interact with us again.
And man, did they interact at your place? I mean, object manipulation. Yeah. That's just amazing. The playback on the EVP on the mixtape. That's wow.
Yeah. I don't know that I would even consider that an EVP.
Sorry, you're right. I used the wrong terminology.
Well, no, I wasn't saying that to correct you. Whatever it was, just basically eliminated whatever was on that magnetic tape to begin with and replaced it with some god awful sounding growling and guttural churning.
That concludes part 1, ladies and gentlemen. We'll conclude with Erick Szilagyi next time on Paranormal Insight. Thank you for watching and listening. Please click the subscribe button and activate notifications for future episodes and other content. On Spotify, please don't forget to leave us a 5-star review. If you have a paranormal experience that you would like to discuss on the show, please email us at paranormal.insight.podcast@gmail.com. That's paranormal.insight.podcast@gmail.com. Find us on Facebook and Instagram under paranormal.insight.podcast